Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the channel for some more Heroes of Normandie action today. Now today's video arose out of an interesting conversation I had with one of my friends recently, and we were discussing one of my favourite topics, which is how you integrate the British into scenarios that were written for US versus German forces. And also recommended short scenarios that can be quite fun for introducing new players to the game that play quickly and combine a reasonable length of time so that you can try out your troops and find out what they can do, but also have an interesting sudden death victory condition that can end the game for an unwary player if they are not paying attention. And we both decided that we really quite liked the plain Carnage scenario from the original Heroes of Normandie core box. And the reason we like this scenario is it's got a reasonable balance of points for both sides. We're talking about 175 points per side, which is a nice, manageable force for a new player. And the other benefit of it, as you can see from the map layout, is it's really compact. You know, this has a fair bit of terrain, including field fortification, which is quite nice. So you get a chance to, have a fair bit of maneuver. It's not too long a time before your units are able to see each other and get into a firefight. And it's a 6-turn scenario, so you can play around with it quite a lot. But the attraction in terms of the sudden death element is that very, very random victory location that has to be secured by either side. Now, whoever manages to end a turn with their side controlling it, i.e. having an infantry unit sitting on one of those squares with no other enemy units contesting it, will win the battle. So it injects an element of risk. You don't really want to push your guys into that uncontested spot. That exposed spot in the middle there. But if you take that risk, there might be a very good chance that you could secure it. So it gives players that nice tense decision that they have to make, and one would hope they could pull it off if they do it properly. So I'm just going to start by talking about the forces I've chosen. Now I'll zoom in on the Germans first because I may as well. I'm keeping the original German force from the scenario. So we have here elements of the 1st Battalion Panzer Grenadiers from the 902nd Panzer Regiment. They consist of a Panzerschreck group with a recon group, a fire group, and the Panzerschrecks, obviously. They have an intrinsic officer, another recon group, and another 2 fire groups. And their force is rounded out with an upgunned Panzer II and a stack of grenades. Their opponents, I've decided on this occasion that I'm going to give Lord Lovat's Commandos a bit of a test drive. I quite like the Commandos. I've only played with them once or twice before, including in my somewhat disastrous Ersatz Khan scenario a few videos ago. But I'd really like to give them a test in this scenario. So we have the core team with Lord Lovat himself, 2 fire teams, a mortar team, and a support team. And I've decided to bulk out their force with a bazooka team, very necessary because we have no armor with us and I need something that can kill that German tank or at least worry it. A Vickers heavy machine gun because that kind of support never hurts. And to round out the British force, plenty of ammo. Before I look at how the forces are disposed, I'm just going to say that I have had a lot of fun playing with the solo mode, but I'm not going to use it on this occasion because it has been a while since I'd had a chance to actually play a game against a human player. And I've been enjoying the solo mode so much that I'm actually beginning to worry that I'm forgetting how to play the 2-player game. So I'm going to run this as a 2-player using the normal rules, but of course I'll be soloing it. And I'm just going to settle for playing both sides as honestly as I can and hoping for the best. Hopefully it'll give you all a good show. So, to the opposing forces, let's just have a quick look at the Germans. Now they've got quite a nicely balanced force, so I've decided it's a good idea to have their 2 recon-capable units forward in the centre and on the right flank. My thinking behind placing them there is that the German centre unit has a choice. They can either make a run straight for the objective and worry the British early, or if they risk exposure for the extra speed, they can try and dash and seize that empty field fortification, because if they do on turn 1, that could make life very difficult for the British. Now, the other German recon unit, of course, is in a beautiful position to secure whatever this lovely thing may turn out to be. So they can make a dash too. It'll be risky, but it may be worth it. The rest of the German forces deployed fairly conventionally. The area is heavily wooded and there's hedgerows, so that is really the only place they can have their tank to start with. So I've placed the tank there, a somewhat heavier infantry arm on their left flank, because ultimately there's that important victory area that could well decide the game. But the tank is not completely devoid of support on the right, and of course their precious officer is there too. Those units are hung back a little bit, just, because keep them a bit safe. They're not that essential to bring into action just yet. Now, looking at their British opponents, I won't bother stepping around the table. I'll just come here and zoom in a bit. Slightly more compact force, but quite an effective one nonetheless. The British have divided into 2 groups. The smaller element, interestingly enough, is the one closer to the victory location there. And that consists of the bazooka team, the Vickers machine gun team, and a fire team backing them up. Now, they're going to try and make a play for the objective, but really, if they can't quite get to it on that turn, they're just going to try and keep the Germans pinned down. Over here, the British have the fire team, the support team, Lord Lovat himself, and the mortar team. Now, what they're hoping to do is, if they can get into a good position and perhaps even get there, we'll have to see, they can bring a fair amount of fire to bear from that good defensive position, and of course, there's the entrenchments, and hopefully dominate the battlefield so that even if they can't secure the objective, they can maybe force a draw. Now, of course, this being a normal game rather than the solo mode game, the Germans don't benefit from endless reinforcement, so every casualty they suffer will of course hurt them, and the same goes for the British. So I have tossed a coin to see who goes first, and the Germans have won the toss significantly. So let's start and see how we go. So we begin with the orders phase of turn 1. Of course, the Germans go first. Now, I think the first order token, which they generate 3 altogether, 1 for the Panzerschreck group and 2 for the Oberleutnant. The first one should go to the first recon group, because that's got the most important set of choices to make. The second one, if I were the German player, I would give to the other recon group, because those 2 will be putting the most pressure on the British. It's a slightly harder choice as regards the third one. And I think the best candidate to give it to would probably be that unit there, which is an infantry fire group. Now, why not the tank, you're probably wondering? Well, on this turn, trundling it forward would give it a good position, but of course, vehicles can't seize objectives, and the Germans really want some options in terms of taking that. So getting that fire group crashing forward into the woods is bringing another effective unit into play and giving the British something to worry about. Now, speaking of the British, they are at a slight disadvantage because although Lord Lovat has the autonomous action ability, he's the only one who generates order tokens for the British. So he has an order token which he generates himself, plus another 2 for his entire force. But the trouble is, the reason the British are at a slight disadvantage there is that one of those order tokens must always be for Lord Lovat, which is a pain, because I may not always want to move him, but, you know, it is what it is. So the British do have a long-range advantage with their mortar team. So we have an indirect fire capability there. Let me just straighten this out a bit so I'm not depriving you all of a view of the battlefield. Let's see if I can close in just a little bit. There, that will hopefully do it. So, wanting to begin with a preliminary bombardment, the British are going to give their first order token to the mortar team. An early lucky shot may bear dividends. Now, as for the next order, again, there's a difficult choice to be had here. I think, although this may seem a bit counterintuitive, I think giving it to that support team over there might be a good idea. They have options too. They can run and man the position on the hedgerow, or they can try and make a beeline for the entrenchments. They could run into that position, which would give them choices. But whatever happens, we don't want to give the Germans an easy run at that bonus crate over there. And of course, the last token I have to give to Lord Lovat because it's his autonomous move. So that's the orders phase. The Germans are just going to double check their cards. That's pretty useful. The rest perhaps a bit less so. And what do the British have? Okay, not too bad. Yeah, that'll be useful when the firing starts. And 2 speed setups. Now, they really don't need that many because the only unit they have that has to worry about setting up is the Vickers machine gun. And that's a pretty situational card. So I think the British will be doing some discarding at the end of the turn. But anyway. The Germans are, because they intend to do some shooting at some point, going to keep that card in reserve for now because they are going to expose their recon unit. The question is, where's it going to go? And rather than mindlessly rush straight for that, they're going to be a bit sensible about this. So they're going to flip over so that they gain the benefit of their movement rating of 4. And they're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And take control of at least half of that entrenchment. It's a good opening move for them. The British are not very keen on this. So they're going to activate their mortar team, but the question is what to aim at. They could try for a lucky shot against the crowded German rear area, or they could try to bring some force to bear onto that German unit there. It's a difficult choice again. In the interests of clearing their front line, they're going to take a chance and opt for lobbing a mortar shell at the Germans who've had the temerity to run forward into that fortified patch there. So let's see whether the mortars are on target because they don't have a direct line of sight, and at least not an unobstructed one. And they've rolled a 2. Unfortunately, the bombardment wanders. So the mortars fire. They're a little bit short. They've landed in the hedge. That's a tiny bit unfortunate. So the Germans are not fazed by that. So back to the Germans. they are going to move their other recon unit. Now this one is going to remain concealed for now, because I think... that doesn't block line of sight. Okay, they're not going to bother because as they emerge, they're going to be spotted. But they're going to go there because that puts them a little bit out of the line of sight of everybody else, and they're still dominating that little box over there, whatever it contains. So the British, what are the British going to do? They're a bit wary of that German unit down there. They know they've got to do something about it because it's going to be a right pain for them. But maybe they can rely on some of their other units to clear it away. For now, they're going to content themselves with moving that unit there. They can't... they can fire, so they're going to... they are going to have a crack at that German unit. And they're not going to go for suppression fire. They're going to hope to kill them. But it's a -1, so let's see what happens. The British roll a 4. Only a +1 for 5, but it's just enough to hit the German recon group, who, of course, because they only have one step, are eliminated. So that was a good move on the part of the British. And it means they, on a future turn, might have a stab at grabbing that crate. The Germans, meanwhile, are going to... they are going to play their advance card. And they're going to move this group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they are going to really pile the pressure on the British now because they are occupying one of the squares that allows them to dominate the victory space. That is very bad news, because if the British don't do something about that, at least contest it by the end of the turn, then the Germans will have won an embarrassingly easy victory at the end of turn 1. So what is going to happen now? It's Lord Lovat who's up. And I think I'm going to take a big risk because this is my entire command structure that I have to worry about here. Lord Lovat is going to chuck himself into that bit of hedge. He's not capable of moving fire, which is a shame, because I would like him, if he had been able to, or if I'd had a burst into action card for the British, it would have been great to have been able to have him take a pop at them, but it's not to be. So that's the end of the regular orders for the first turn. The only thing I'm going to do is actually the British could make use of that. So as it's the activation phase still, they're going to play that card, be ready, to take that token off that unit so that they can make a run for the box. And they're just congratulating themselves on how clever this is when the Germans say no. So unfortunately, the British won't get to do that this turn. And so we just go to the supply phase, the end of the turn, and we get the regular movement of units. Now, for the Germans, after their initial very good manoeuvring, I think the best thing is really just to go for a general advance, because they've got what they wanted there. Now they just need to consolidate it. They're going to be a little bit cautious there because the British do have the initiative next turn and they don't want to overly expose themselves. As for the British, tough choices all round, I think. That fire team is going to move right up to the lip of that fortification. Very risky move, but they do want to take the thing. That machine gun unit is going to move there. Oh, we have a problem. We have a problem. How to get a unit there? Let me be a bit more intelligent about this. Where did you come from anyway? You were there, weren't you? Yes. 1, 2, yeah. Actually, come to think of it, my only hope of preventing a German victory would have been to play the Be Ready card on Lord Lovat and have him move there to try and contest it. It would have been suicidal. But I think he's the only one who can make it, unless 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh dear, let me play this out and see what happens. So 1, 2, 3. Yep, they would have positioned themselves there to try and storm that position. The Vickers would have got itself into the hedge and flipped over. What would the bazooka have done? The bazooka team would probably have wanted to go 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4 to get themselves in a position to challenge that tank. And the fire team would have little option but to just rush forward. But of course, this being the supply phase, they can't take a shot. So I'm sorry to say that the embarrassing thing that I talked about has actually happened. It's the end of the supply phase, and a German unit is sitting right on the objective, which means they have won on turn 1. And it's been a fairly bloodless victory. I mean, okay, they lost their recon group, but so what? They've won the game. Yes, memo to self, take your own advice about paying attention. Although, to be fair, I think luck of the cards did doom me as well. But that's all right. That does spare you a extremely long and grueling and a slogging match of a series of videos. The only thing I would say, and this is really a focus on the British here, despite their terrible showing and having lost the race to the Germans, if you do try this scenario as a way of mucking about with the British, I really would recommend using Lord Lovat's Commandos because they do have some really, really fun options when you're building them as a force. I was very briefly tempted to use this because this level of infiltration, you see that's a 6 there, would have enabled the British to start 2 of their units 6 spaces ahead of their deployment zone, which would mean they could have started with units right there. Now, the reason I did not do that is because it would have been hideously unfair, and unless circumstances were amazingly ideal, there's no way the Germans would have pushed them out of it. So that's what made me stay my hand over picking this incredibly powerful option. Now, of course, having seen what's happened to me on turn 1, you're probably thinking, well, Andrew, you were properly done over there, so maybe you should have done that, mate. Maybe you're all right. But yes, the British can, in better circumstances, have an even chance of winning this game. That was a bit of a surprise. I didn't actually see that coming, but it just goes to show in this scenario how quickly things can go south. But the beauty of it is, because it is such a small scenario, if something like that happens, you can just set it up and try again. You can also try swapping sides if you want to see how the British perform from the perspective of the enemy. So you have lots of options, and if you want to, change the map around a bit, take that away, just make it a straightforward battle between two forces. There's a lot you can do. It's a very versatile scenario, and it's a sort of scenario where you can get a lot of games in an evening. It's even a very good filler between games. So I'll leave it there. I hope you all don't mind how brief this video was. As I say, I wasn't quite expecting the Germans to do away with me that quickly, or even that bloodlessly, because this is, after all, Heroes of Normandy. But if you haven't played this scenario for a while, or if you haven't had a chance to try plain Carnage at all, I really would recommend it. It's great fun. It's got a really good point balance. You can try lots of different British units. The next time I might even try using a British armoured unit to contest this position, but you would have to give them some infantry support because of the nature of the victory conditions. But I would say try it. Having just been kind of beaten up by myself, I still enjoyed that, brief though it was. I may set it up again and give it another try, but I'll do that in my own time. I suppose all it remains for me to say now is thank you all for watching this. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you derived a huge amount of amusement from it. At least I'm certainly laughing at myself at the moment. And so, as per usual, a huge hello to all my veterans. Really nice to see you guys. It's always good to catch up, and I welcome any comments. Please feel free to point out any really moronic tactical mistakes I may have made in the setup or in how I got my boys moving forwards. Always happy to hear from you, and more than happy to answer you. Apologies if I'm a bit slow on that sometimes, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. But I'm always grateful for your company. It's really good to have you along for the ride with these videos and with this series and this game in particular, which I really adore. So until the next video, thank you all very much for tuning in. Bye.